So, have you ever heard of the doomsday clock? It's this symbol, right? A bunch of atomic scientists came up with it way back in 1947. The whole idea is to show just how close we are to, well, a global catastrophe. Midnight is the end, and where that clock is set right now, honestly, it's pretty startling. Let's get into it.
89 seconds. That's it. That is where we are right now. 89 seconds to midnight. And to put that in perspective, that is the closest we have ever been. I mean, closer than the peak of the Cold War, even closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis. So yeah, this isn't just some dramatic metaphor, it's a real warning from the world's top scientists telling us we're in completely uncharted territory.
Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? Why now? Why are things so bad? Well, it turns out it's not just one single thing. Experts are actually pointing to this really rare combination of three huge forces, and they all seem to be coming to a head right around the year 2026. So what we're going to do now is break down exactly how these three ingredients are cooking up what you could call a perfect storm of global risk.
Okay, so ingredient number one in this perfect storm. The old rulebook is basically getting torn up. You know, for decades we had these treaties that acted like guardrails, keeping the nuclear peace. But now, the very last one, the final safety net, is about to just vanish. And that's going to leave the world's biggest nuclear powers without any rules to play by for the first time in more than half a century.
And this is the rulebook I'm talking about. It's called the New START Treaty. Look, for years, this thing has been the absolute bedrock of stability. It put a hard cap on how many long-range nukes the US and Russia could have. But even more important, it let them actually inspect each other's arsenals, to make sure nobody was cheating. It built trust, or at least predictability.
And what's so wild is when you look at the timeline. Back in 1991, when the first version of this treaty was signed, the doomsday clock was wound back to 17 minutes to midnight. That is the safest humanity has ever been, according to the clock. So these rules, they worked. But then you see that last date, February 4th, 2026. That's when it all just stops. It expires. And the scariest part? There is no replacement being worked on.
So what happens next? That's the critical part. With the treaty, you get limits, you get inspections, you get transparency. You kind of know what the other side is doing. Without it, you get secrecy, deep mistrust, and both sides are forced to plan for the absolute worst-case scenario. It's like switching off the last set of traffic lights on a super busy highway. The odds of a crash just skyrocket, not because anyone wants to crash, but because nobody has a clue what the other driver's about to do.
All right, let's talk about ingredient number 2. And this one is a total wild card, artificial intelligence. I mean, this is something that just didn't exist during the Cold War, and it brings a whole new set of ways for things to go horribly, catastrophically wrong.
Now, the biggest risk here isn't what you see in the movies, some evil AI taking over. It's actually way more subtle, and it's very, very human. It's a psychological quirk called automation bias. Just think about it. You're in a massive crisis. You have maybe minutes to make a world-ending decision. There's this incredibly strong pull to just trust what the computer is telling you, to just assume it's right, even if the data it's using is completely wrong.
And here's a perfect example of how that could actually play out. It all starts with something small, like a tiny sensor glitch. But the AI, which is designed to spot threats, sees that glitch and flags it as a major attack. This creates what experts call false confidence. The humans in charge, who are under unbelievable stress, they just defer to the machine because it sounds so sure of itself. And boom, just like that, a tiny mistake snowballs into an irreversible world-ending decision.
And listen, this is not just me spitballing here. Richard Danzig, who used to be the Secretary of the Navy, was crystal clear about this. He warned that we literally risk losing control over our own creations. We're building these AI systems that are so complex, so opaque, like a black box, that even the people who build them don't fully get how they'll act in a real crisis.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got no rules, we've got unpredictable tech. The third and final ingredient for our perfect storm? It's the world itself. The whole global order, the one that might have been able to handle these problems is, well, it's fracturing. It's falling apart right when we need those guardrails the most.
So get this, according to a major think tank, the Eurasia Group, the #1 biggest global risk for 2026 is what they're calling the US political revolution. Basically, their analysis is that the one country that's always been seen as the anchor of the whole international system is now becoming a major source of instability itself, which, makes it almost impossible for anyone, friends or enemies, to predict what's going to happen next.
And hey, it's not just the US. America's key allies are also dealing with some intense pressure at home. That same report points to Europe under siege. talking about how major players like France, Germany, and the UK are kind of politically paralyzed right now. And that just weakens the whole Western alliance, making it way harder to deal with a crisis if one pops up.
And all this instability, it has very real, very scary consequences. That same report lists the water weapon as another top risk. We're seeing things like the water treaty between India and Pakistan basically falling apart. It's a perfect example of how environmental problems and a total lack of cooperation are turning something as basic as water into a flashpoint for conflict between two nuclear-armed countries.
So, okay, how does this all come together? I mean, each of these things we talked about, the end of treaties, the rise of AI, and this global instability is dangerous enough on its own. But what makes right now so unique and so incredibly risky is that they're not happening one by one. They are all converging, all hitting at the exact same time.
So let's just quickly recap the three ingredients of this perfect storm. First, we have no rules. The agreements that kept things stable are gone. Second, we have this unpredictable technology in AI that's creating brand new ways for accidents to happen. And third, we have an unstable world, which is basically the chaotic backdrop where all these dangers could just ignite.
And really, that's the main takeaway here. It's not any one of these things. It's the powerful, incredibly dangerous combination of all three happening at once. That's what has pushed the doomsday clock to 89 seconds to midnight. And that's why the world is on red alert for 2026.
Which leaves us with a really tough question, right? When the old maps are useless and you're trying to find your way with a compass that might be broken, how do you even get to safety? In a world with no rules and with technology we don't fully control, figuring out how to stop that clock from ticking even one more second forward, that's probably the biggest challenge of our lifetime.